an audiobook romance story. Chapter 1. The constant, demanding hum of the Zenith Club, an exclusive dining establishment nestled in Midtown Manhattan, was the soundtrack to Bridget's life. At 24, she moved through the dining room with a weary, practiced efficiency, balancing a tray laden with glittering, overpriced entrees. Her focus was sharp, not from natural grace, but from the brutal necessity of not making a mistake. She was running on a perpetual deficit of sleep and money. Her heart's entire, desperate purpose was her 16-year-old sister, Allie. Orphaned years ago, Bridget was Allie's sole guardian. Allie's chronic autoimmune disorder was manageable, but the specialized treatments and medications were a catastrophic expense, a constant, crushing weight that pressed Bridget into a high-pressure scramble of 2 jobs and overdue bills. Table 14, Bridget VIP, the floor manager snapped, his cologne heavy and distracting. Move quickly. Bridget nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. Every cent mattered. As she navigated the dimly lit room, she felt the shift in the atmosphere, a sudden, respectful quiet that demanded attention. It was the hush reserved for the arrival of true power. She delivered her plates, then glanced toward the entrance. That's when she saw him. He was seated alone in a corner banquette, the most private spot in the club. Elijah Marcus. The name was a force of nature in New York finance and development. His corporation, Marcus Global, shaped skylines and dictated markets. He was only 34, yet he possessed the cool, unsmiling gravitas of a man who held the city in his hand. His dark suit was impeccable, clearly tailored to fit the powerful musculature underneath. He wasn't loud or demanding. His presence was simply inescapable. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, deep, and unnervingly observant, sweeping the room with a focused intensity that made her feel, for the first time that night, completely visible. Beside his table stood a man of impressive, professional bearing. Michael, his head of logistics and personal driver, unobtrusive and silent. Bridget hurried back to the service station, trying to shrink into the shadows. She caught Elijah's gaze again, and this time it held. It was an intense, analyzing stare, and for a flickering second, a profound, almost painful sadness crossed his features before his typical mask of cool detachment settled back. Just finish the shift, she commanded herself. The rest of the hour blurred. She kept her eyes down, avoiding the corner booth, until a text from Allie's pharmacy, refill ready, $1,400 due, sent a fresh spike of panic through her. When she next looked up, Elijah Marcus was gone. A sudden wave of relief washed over her, only to be replaced by guilt that she hadn't ensured his experience was perfect. She approached the deserted banquette to clear the linen, and there it was, tucked beneath the crisp white cloth, resting innocently beside a crystal water glass, was a wallet. It was a sleek, dark leather bifold, clearly expensive. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Inside, she knew, would be credit cards and easily enough cash to pay Allie's bill, perhaps even 2. The desperate thought flared, I could take it. I could say I didn't see it. The thought vanished as quickly as it came, shame burning her cheeks. She was tired, she was scared, but she was not a thief. She snatched the wallet, slipping it into the inner pocket of her worn service vest. She checked the clock. 11:51 p.m. He hadn't been gone more than 5 minutes. I need to leave now, she told her manager. Mr. Marcus just left his wallet. I saw Michael taking the car around. Wait, Bridget. I can handle his office in the morning. No time, she insisted, tearing off her vest and grabbing her cheap, thin coat. He might need it tonight. It's too important. She burst out the staff exit and into the frigid air of the alley, then rushed toward the executive lot. The roar of a massive engine confirmed her timing. The enormous black armored sedan, a luxury vehicle that looked like a smooth, modern tank, was already pulling away from the curb. Bridget sprinted, her worn sneakers slipping slightly on the damp pavement. "Mr. Marcus, stop!" she yelled, waving her arms. The brake lights flashed, and the car smoothly halted. The rear passenger window glided down silently. Elijah Marcus was inside, a dark silhouette against the plush interior light. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers with that same unsettling, precise focus. Bridget was breathless, her chest heaving. She thrust the leather wallet toward the open window. "You left this at your table. I chased you down." Elijah took the wallet. He didn't check the cash or the cards. He simply held it, his gaze locked on her face, searching. "You risked your job, running out into the street for this," he stated, his voice a low, smooth baritone. "I needed to return it, sir. It's the right thing to do." He finally slipped the wallet into his jacket pocket. Then, slowly, he reached inside, pulling out a sheaf of bills. "For your integrity, take it." Bridget took an automatic step back, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. "No, thank you, Mr. Marcus. I don't want a reward." Elijah's eyebrows lifted fractionally, a flicker of surprise, followed by something that looked like profound recognition. He lowered the money. "Most people have a price, miss." "Bridget." "Bridget," he repeated, the name rolling off his tongue with a distinct intimacy. "I suppose you're not most people." He paused, leaning slightly toward the window. "I need a new personal assistant, someone to manage my philanthropic ventures and coordinate my private schedule. I need absolute integrity and discretion." He looked directly at her, his eyes shining with an unnerving conviction. "It pays 4 times your current income, plus full, premium medical coverage for any immediate family member. Your sister, Allie, would never have to worry about a bill again." The offer was staggering, unbelievable. It was the solution, the lifeboat she had prayed for. "I'm a barmaid, sir," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm not qualified." "You passed my test," he countered simply. "I'll call your manager tomorrow to finalize your resignation. Michael will bring a contract to your apartment at 10:00 a.m. Be ready." Before she could speak another word, the window rose, sealing him away. The massive car accelerated smoothly, swallowed by the darkness of the city streets. Bridget stood alone in the empty parking lot, clutching her coat, her mind reeling. She didn't know it yet, but the wallet had never been lost. It had been planted. And by returning it, she had just walked into the orbit of a man who was testing her not for a job, but for a role in his heart. Chapter 2. Bridget didn't sleep. She paced the small apartment, listening to the soft, even breathing of Allie from the bedroom. The offer was overwhelming, salvation for Allie, guaranteed. But it was also terrifyingly controlling. "He'll call your manager to finalize your resignation." He was already running her life. At exactly 9:55 a.m., the doorbell rang. Michael, the impeccably dressed driver, stood on her worn landing, holding a thick folder. His expression was professional, polite, and completely devoid of judgment. "Good morning, miss," he said quietly. "Mr. Marcus asked me to deliver this. He is available by video conference in 10 minutes. Michael waited silently in her cramped living room, while Bridget frantically changed into the best professional attire she owned. A simple black sheath dress she usually reserved for funerals or important exams. Promptly at 10:05 a.m., the screen of the expensive tablet Michael provided sprang to life. Elijah Marcus was seated in a vast, modern office space that seemed to stretch toward the clouds. "Bridget," he greeted her, his voice perfectly level. "Have you reviewed the terms?" "I don't have time to review them," she retorted, placing the folder on her small kitchen table. But I have questions. First, why the test? Why plant your wallet? Elijah didn't flinch. I needed a personal assistant who would be privy to highly sensitive corporate information, private family matters, and the operational details of my foundation. I require absolute integrity. My previous candidates had experience, but lacked character. The test determined your character. It was manipulative, she stated. I prefer to call it efficient vetting, he countered. Next question. Bridget took a deep breath. The salary and benefits are excessive for an assistant with my experience. The excessive nature reflects the required exclusivity and discretion, Elijah explained. You would be managing my life and my sister's foundation. It reflects the value of the trust I am placing in you. And yes, it reflects the need to ensure Allie receives the best possible care, which is my secondary objective. Why? Bridget pressed. Why Allie? Why me? Why this incredible charity? Elijah paused. The high-definition camera showed a faint tightening around his eyes. Because you reminded me of what I lost. He leaned forward, dropping his voice. My wife, Aubrey, passed away from cancer 3 years ago. She was a beautiful, honest soul. She had a selfless devotion to service. When I saw you, you possessed that same spirit, that pure, uncompromised honesty and focus on caring for family. Aubrey was my anchor. When I lost her, I became colder, more ruthless. I am not her, Bridget stated firmly. I know, he agreed, the pain in his eyes suddenly sharp. But you remind me that kindness still exists. And Allie's illness, that devotion to saving your sister, that is a cause Aubrey would have championed. I am hearing you for your competence, but I am funding Allie's care because of your character. The honesty, though deeply personal, resonated. It wasn't about crime or revenge. It was about grief and the search for goodness. The job will be demanding. You will be traveling constantly. I will expect you to relocate to an apartment near the Citadel, my corporate headquarters, he continued. I can't just leave Allie, Bridget argued. The contract covers that, Elijah assured her. Allie will have a full-time, private home health nurse, specialists on standby, and she can stay in your current apartment or move with you to the new executive housing. She will be taken care of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of where you are. He held up a hand. Let's be clear, Bridget. I am a tough man. I have fierce corporate rivals who would stop at nothing to gain an advantage over me. I demand loyalty and discretion. If you accept this, your life becomes complicated, but Allie's life becomes stable. Bridget looked toward Allie's closed door. She could guarantee Allie's future, stability, and health with one signature. The choice was clear. I accept, Mr. Marcus, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. But I have one non-negotiable term. Name it. The day I find out you have asked me to do anything illegal, or the day I find out you lied about the core nature of your business, I walk. And Allie's care remains uninterrupted for a full year while I transition out. A faint, almost appreciative smile touched Elijah's lips. Fair enough, Bridget. I accept your term. He watched her sign the electronic documents. Welcome to Marcus Global. Michael will be taking you to your new residence now, and your orientation begins tomorrow morning at 6:00 a.m. The screen went dark. Bridget looked at the luxury tablet, then at the sealed contract. She had traded her hard-won independence for stability, and she was now firmly locked into Elijah Marcus's powerful, complex world. Chapter 3. The next few weeks passed in a blur of seismic change. Bridget moved into a luxurious, sleek apartment in the high-rise residential wing adjacent to the Citadel, Elijah Marcus's corporate headquarters. The apartment felt more like a museum than a home, but the sheer security and comfort were undeniable. Allie, under the care of a dedicated team, was thriving, her mood brighter, her pain levels managed, and the terrifying financial stress erased. Bridget threw herself into the job. The Citadel was a kingdom of glass and steel, and Elijah was its absolute ruler. She quickly mastered the Byzantine organization of his empire, which spanned international finance, massive infrastructure development, and several key philanthropic initiatives. She learned his routine: Americano at 6:00 a.m., a preference for silence in the car, driven always by Michael, the unflappable man of logistics, and an astonishing capacity to absorb complex data while simultaneously negotiating a multi-million-dollar acquisition. She quickly saw the difference between his public and private personas. Publicly, he was guarded, cold, and often ruthless in business. Privately, he was demanding but fair, surprisingly patient when explaining complex financial instruments, and capable of startling, quiet kindness, like the time he canceled a high-stakes meeting because Allie was having a difficult day and needed Bridget home for an hour. The most constant reminder of his past was the photograph of Aubrey. It sat on the far corner of his vast, curved glass desk. Bridget often glanced at it. Aubrey, smiling, her face full of a radiant joy, her resemblance to Bridget subtle, yet undeniable, particularly in the shape of the eyes and the quiet sincerity of her expression. One evening, working late on a project, Bridget asked, "Did she work with you here at the Citadel?" Elijah didn't look up from the document he was reviewing. "No, Aubrey hated the coldness of this building. She managed our charitable foundation, the Renewal Project, from a separate space downtown. She found this place isolating." "It is," Bridget admitted quietly. Elijah finally looked up. He studied her expression. "It was built after she was gone. I wanted a fortress, a place where nothing could touch me." The vulnerability of the admission, that his fortress was a direct result of his grief, struck her. "You handle the pressure well," Elijah commented, changing the subject. "You're constantly exposed to hostile negotiations, threats from rivals, and the demanding schedules, yet you never break." "My sister's health is a more intense pressure than any hostile takeover, sir," Bridget replied honestly. "This is just paperwork." A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Bridget, you must stop calling me sir outside of formal meetings. It's Elijah." She nodded. "Elijah." The name felt heavy, intimate, and a little dangerous on her tongue. The line between professional life and personal space continued to blur. Elijah insisted she join him for working dinners at his private penthouse atop the Citadel. They discussed everything from the latest market trends to Bridget's favorite literature. One evening, as they shared a meal, Elijah commented, "You read Middlemarch 3 times. That's unusual." "I like stories about people trying to be good in a world that makes it very hard," she explained. "And do you believe it's possible?" he asked, his dark eyes intense. "To be good while wielding great power?" "I think you have to work much harder at it," she replied. Elijah leaned back, considering her. "Aubrey believed it was possible. She was convinced I could be both powerful and ethical. I'm less certain." The air was heavy with unspoken emotion. Bridget realized that her simple, honest presence in his life wasn't just about managing logistics. It was about managing his soul. She was constantly testing the strength of his walls, and he, in turn, was testing the limits of her acceptance. The greatest challenge was managing his primary corporate rival, a financier named Jeff Colt. Jeff was known for aggressive, near-predatory tactics, often using character assassination and market manipulation to force acquisitions. "If Jeff Colt calls, he goes straight to voicemail," Elijah instructed her one morning, his voice hard. "Do not engage with his office under any circumstances. He is ruthless, and he sees kindness as weakness. Bridget filed the instruction away, recognizing the implicit warning. Elijah's world was a battlefield, and she, by his side, was now a potential target. The comfort of Allie's stability was slowly being exchanged for the tension of living inside a fortress. Chapter 4. The annual Architects of Change charity gala was the peak of the social season, a massive fundraiser for Elijah's Renewal Project Foundation. For the event, Bridget, following Elijah's terse instructions, found a selection of designer dresses delivered to her apartment. She chose a floor-length gown in a deep sapphire blue. It was elegant, high-necked, and tailored to perfection, giving her the confidence she desperately needed. At 7:30 p.m., the doorbell chimed. Elijah Marcus stood in her foyer, magnificent in a custom tuxedo that emphasized the sheer power of his physique. He stared at her, his usual mask of cool control faltering. "You look beautiful, Bridget," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. "Thank you, Elijah," she replied, feeling a blush warm her neck. He offered his arm. "Shall we face the lions?" They arrived at the Metropolitan Museum, the ballroom glittering with chandeliers and wealth. As they entered, Bridget played her role seamlessly, managing his schedule, making introductions and fielding requests. But she was intensely aware of the shift in the air. She was no longer just the assistant, she was the woman on his arm. Elijah's hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture that was both possessive and deeply protective. It was an unmistakable, public declaration of her importance to him. She met dozens of powerful figures, observing the deference and fear they showed Elijah. Then, a sharp, familiar voice cut through the polite murmurs. "Elijah, darling, you actually brought a date this year." Jeff Colt, the corporate rival, approached, his smile wide and predatory, flanked by a beautiful woman who looked highly uncomfortable. Jeff's gaze swept over Bridget, assessing and then dismissing her, before returning to Elijah. "And who is this charming new acquisition?" Jeff asked, dripping with condescension. "Bridget is my companion tonight," Elijah stated, his voice pleasant but with an undercurrent of steel. "And my personal director. She handles my life." "A director," Jeff drawled, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "From where exactly? I didn't realize you were recruiting talent from the service industry now, Elijah. Seems risky. Loyalty is hard to buy." The barb hit home, referencing Bridget's past job and the core of Elijah's trust issues. Before Bridget could respond, Elijah stepped closer, subtly moving her behind him. "Her loyalty is the only thing I don't have to buy, Jeff. Perhaps you should focus on your own portfolio before you worry about mine." The dismissal was clear. Jeff's smile hardened, and he backed away, but not before giving Bridget a final, chillingly speculative look. "I apologize for him," Elijah murmured, his hand returning to her waist. "He's a corporate bully," Bridget stated, trying to sound calm. "But he has a point. I'm still just a barmaid you hired in a parking lot. What am I to you?" Elijah guided her toward a quieter alcove. His eyes, usually so cold, burned with a fierce intensity. "You are the woman who looks at me, knows what I am capable of in business, and still tells me the truth. You are the opposite of this world. You are my clarity." He moved closer, his breath warm against her ear. "The truth is, I don't know what you are, Bridget, but I know that I cannot function when you are not near me." His admission, raw and startling, stripped away the artifice of the evening. "I want to go home," she whispered, suddenly overwhelmed by the complex, dangerous world she had entered. Elijah studied her face, then nodded curtly. "Michael will bring the car around immediately." Back in the safety of her apartment, the tension was unbearable. Elijah followed her inside, his presence filling the space. "Tell me what you think my role is," Bridget challenged, turning to face him. "Am I a companion, an employee, a reminder of Aubrey?" Elijah walked toward her slowly until he had backed her against the wall. His arms cased her in, hands resting near her shoulders. "You're not Aubrey," he said, his voice husky. "Aubrey was gentle and pure, but she was fragile. You are gentle, but you are fierce. You stood up for your sister, you refused my money, and you refused to bend to the rules of my world. That is strength." His thumb traced her lower lip. "I want you, the honest, defiant, stubborn woman who refused to be bought." "That's biology," she managed, adding how breathless she sounded. "Not a relationship." "I think it is both," he countered. "Tell me to leave, Bridget. Tell me now, or I won't be able to stop." She looked into his eyes, searching for the calculation, the control, the grief. Instead, she found raw, compelling desire. "Stay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The professional walls crumbled entirely. His kiss was consuming, and she met his hunger with her own, winding her arms around his neck, finally surrendering to the chaotic current that had pulled them together. Chapter 5. The weeks that followed were defined by a difficult, exhilarating duality. Days were spent in the meticulous precision of the citadel, where Bridget was his indispensable director, managing his complex life with flawless efficiency. Nights were spent together, where the emotional connection deepened, and the fortress Elijah had built around his heart showed signs of fracturing. The resemblance to Aubrey remained a quiet presence. Once, in the middle of the night, Elijah woke up, his grip tightening around Bridget. "She hated the cold," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep and memory. Bridget knew he wasn't talking about her. "It's okay, Elijah," she whispered, simply holding him. He was devoted to her, protective, and increasingly vulnerable. He began to talk about Aubrey's final months, the cruelty of the illness, his absolute inability to stop it, and the deep, abiding guilt he carried for having all the power in the world but being powerless against cancer. "I promised myself I would never let anything I love be that vulnerable again," he confessed one evening. "You love me?" Bridget asked quietly. Elijah pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "I am terrified of how much I need you. I need your clarity. When I look at you, I remember what matters. You're my only truth." But the shadow of his intense corporate life was always present. Jeff Colt had ramped up his campaign of aggression, circulating damaging, often exaggerated stories about Elijah's ruthless business tactics. Bridget, as his director, was now handling the media backlash. "You need to be careful with Colt," Elijah warned her. "He doesn't fight fairly. He will attack anyone close to me to get leverage." "I'm careful," she assured him, but her mind was spinning. She had heard whispers about how Jeff had destabilized former rivals, not through violence, but through public humiliation and calculated corporate sabotage. One day, while organizing a complex, decades-old financial folder in Elijah's private safe, a requirement for a potential merger, Bridget found something tucked away beneath a stack of documents. It was an envelope. Inside were several high-resolution photographs of Aubrey, and beneath them, a printout of a confidential background report. The report was about Bridget. It detailed her work at the Zenith Club, her guardian status over Allie, her financial struggles, and even the exact due date of Allie's pharmacy bill. It was comprehensive, obsessive, and dated 6 months prior to the night of the lost wallet. Her hands started to tremble. This wasn't the kind of background check one runs on a candidate after they apply for a job. This was surveillance. Tucked at the bottom of the stack was a printed image of a wallet. Not Elijah's actual wallet, but a diagram showing a small, thin tracking chip perfectly embedded into the leather lining, along with a time-stamped log indicating the wallet's location at the corner banquette of the Zenith Club. The breath left her lungs. He'd planted it on purpose. The realization was a crushing physical blow. Everything, the intense gaze, the test, the perfectly timed job offer, the sudden salvation for Allie, had been a cold, calculated orchestration. It wasn't a romance that started in deception. It was a life that began in a carefully constructed lie. She felt physically ill. The intimate moments, the confessions of grief, the declarations of need, were they genuine, or were they simply part of the script he created to integrate his desired anchor into his fortress? She looked at the report again, then at the photo of Aubrey. The resemblance was undeniable. Was I just a convenient ghost? Chapter 6. Bridget carefully returned the file to the safe, her mind racing. She went through the rest of the workday on autopilot, her movements stiff, her responses short. She felt sick with betrayal. Every moment of shared intimacy, every gentle touch, every vulnerable confession from Elijah now felt poisoned by the knowledge that he had been watching her, analyzing her, and testing her for months. That night, she told Elijah she was going to spend the night with Allie, citing her need for a study break. He didn't argue, only looking at her with a penetrating intensity that she now interpreted as monitoring, not affection. Alone in her old apartment, Bridget replayed their relationship, searching for the crack between the lie and the truth. She remembered his genuine joy when Allie's pain decreased, his patient instruction, his anger at Jeff Colt's corporate cruelty. Were those real, or were they just part of the facade needed to keep his chosen replacement happy? The next day, the escalating corporate war provided a terrifying distraction. Jeff Colt launched a calculated attack. He leveraged old, shaky assets and shorted Marcus Global stock, sending shockwaves through the market. The offices at the Citadel were chaos. Elijah was a different man during a corporate battle, cold, ruthless, and terrifyingly efficient. He spent hours behind the sealed doors of his office, emerging only to issue curt, absolute commands. He's trying to acquire the assets needed for the upcoming Central District bid, Elijah explained to Bridget, who was furiously coordinating legal and financial teams. He wants to cripple me. He sees this as a kill shot. He's ruthless, Bridget agreed, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, and he knows my patterns, Elijah replied, tapping his pen. He knows I focus on defense before offense. That same afternoon, Jeff Colt didn't stop at financial attacks. He went personal. Bridget's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Miss Winters, the slick voice of Jeff Colt purred on the other end. I trust your sister is doing well. That rare autoimmune disorder is terribly expensive. Bridget's blood ran cold. How do you know about Allie? Please, my dear. When you work for a man like Elijah Marcus, everything about you becomes public record. I know your entire history, from your shifts at the Zenith Club to your guardian status. Jeff's tone was pure threat. Now I have a proposition. If you simply give me access to Elijah's private scheduling database for tomorrow morning, a simple, small breach, Allie's medical debt, past and future, disappears. I will not betray Elijah, Bridget stated, gripping the phone so hard her knuckles turned white. Such loyalty for a man who tracked you for months, planted his wallet, and only hired you because you look like his dead wife, Jeff countered, hitting the emotional weak spots with surgical precision. You're a ghost of his past, Bridget, not a future. Why defend a lie? Bridget hung up, slamming the phone down on her desk. Jeff Colt knew. The secret was out, and the knowledge that Jeff had access to her most sensitive life details, Allie's illness, was terrifying. She walked straight into Elijah's private office, pushing past Michael, who was trying to intercept her. Elijah looked up, his face carved from stone, his eyes focused entirely on a projection screen detailing stock performance. "Jeff Colt called," Bridget stated, her voice shaking. "He knows everything. About the wallet, about the surveillance, about Allie, and about Aubrey." Elijah went completely still. The stock market, the billions of dollars, vanished from his attention. Only Bridget remained. "What did he offer you?" Elijah asked, his voice low, dangerously quiet. "He tried to bribe me to betray you. He called me a ghost." She clenched her hands. "I need the truth, Elijah. Now, did you hire me because I reminded you of your dead wife, or did you ever intend to see me as myself?" The fortress had been breached. The corporate war was forgotten. The emotional battle had finally begun. Chapter 7. Elijah rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate and heavy. He walked around his desk until he was only feet away from her. The air crackled with suppressed emotion. "It's time we leave the citadel," he stated, not answering her question. "Michael, have the car brought around immediately. We're going to the penthouse." Bridget didn't move. "I'm not leaving until you answer me." "I can't answer you here," he insisted, his voice hardening with impatience. "We are in the middle of a hostile takeover. Every word is potentially recorded. We are not safe." She relented, recognizing the severity of the crisis. Michael whisked them in the car to the private elevator leading to Elijah's penthouse. Once inside the vast, silent and secure apartment, Bridget turned on him. "Tell me everything," she demanded, her voice thick with pain. "Tell me about the surveillance, the wallet, the lies, and Aubrey." Elijah ran a frustrated hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "Yes, I saw you 6 months ago at the Zenith Club while I was having a meeting. Yes, you bore a striking resemblance to Aubrey." He walked to a minimalist sculpture on a side table and stared at it. "When Aubrey died, I became a shell. I only focused on power and winning. When I saw you, you possessed her kindness, her quiet integrity. I wanted that near me. I needed an anchor." He turned back to face her. "I had you investigated. I found out about Allie and your situation. I knew you were desperate, but your integrity was ironclad. That was the test. Could I find a person of pure character who couldn't be bought, even under immense pressure?" "And the wallet," Bridget whispered, tears finally blurring her vision. "The wallet was planted," he admitted, his face etched with regret. "It was the final step of my plan to force you into my orbit. I needed a clean break from the service industry and a dramatic enough moment to justify the salary and the benefits package. I didn't want you to feel you had applied for the job. I wanted you to feel chosen." "Chosen to be a substitute," she finished bitterly. "A ghost." "No," Elijah strode toward her, his eyes blazing with conviction. "That was my motivation initially, but the plan ended the moment you signed that contract." He cupped her face, forcing her to look into his eyes. "I hired Aubrey's memory, but I fell in love with Bridget. Aubrey would have crumbled under the pressure of the citadel. You thrive. Aubrey was pure light. You accept the necessary darkness of my life. I love you because you are strong, not because you are a ghost. You are more than she was, Bridget." The admission was raw, overwhelming. It didn't excuse the deception, but it laid bare his profound emotional wound and his journey. "I can't just move past this," Bridget said, pulling away, her throat tight with unshed tears. "You built our foundation on a lie. How can I ever trust the truth you tell me now?" The irony was agonizing. He hired her for integrity, yet he started the relationship with absolute deception. Before Elijah could respond, the private phone on the table, the secure line to Michael, flared to life. Elijah grabbed it instantly. "Michael, report." The voice on the other end was frantic. "Sir, Jeff Colt's team just released a coordinated public report. It details Miss Winter's background, her sister's medical history, the details of her original employment, and implies you use your charity to funnel money. Elijah's jaw clenched. And the wallet. The story details how you planted the wallet to acquire leverage over Miss Winters. It suggests she is either a spy or a kept woman. The market is reacting violently, sir. Colt is succeeding. Bridget sank onto a nearby sofa, burying her face in her hands. She had become his weakness, exactly what Jeff Colt had wanted. Elijah slammed the phone down. He looked at Bridget, his expression a mixture of profound self-loathing and fierce, absolute protection. "I have to go back to the Citadel," he said, his voice hard. "This isn't just about money now, it's about reputation. And I will burn Jeff Colt to the ground if he touches you or Allie again." "No," Bridget said, rising, her resolve suddenly steel. "You are not going to fight him alone. I am your personal director. I know his corporate patterns, I know your defenses, and I know exactly what lie he's selling about me. I may not trust you yet, but I will not let him destroy the stability you bought for Allie." She looked at him, her eyes blazing. "We walk back into that war room together, Elijah. The questions about us can wait. We defend the Empire first." Chapter 8. The atmosphere in the Citadel's command center was electric with crisis. Lawyers, analysts, and senior executives were moving with the frantic, organized energy of a naval crew during battle. Elijah and Bridget, side by side, walked into the fray. "We need a statement," an executive yelled. "We need to address the media leak about the planted wallet and the girl's past." "Silence," Elijah commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. "Bridget, report on Colt's primary leverage point." Bridget, instantly reverting to her professional role, grabbed a marker and walked to the whiteboard. "He has two objectives. First, the public humiliation. Second, financial. The leak is designed to drop our stock just low enough for him to trigger the option on the Central District land deal. If we lose that land, we lose the merger." She looked at Elijah. "Your public defense is simple, Elijah. You don't deny the truth, you spin it." "Spin what? That I stalked my assistant and faked a crime," he challenged. "No, you confirm you met me and ran a background check, which is standard. You confirm the wallet was a test of integrity, which is noble. And you confirm the medical coverage for Allie is a humanitarian effort. You turn the story from stalker billionaire to philanthropist fights corporate corruption to hire a woman of true virtue." "That's a risk," the general counsel muttered. "The public already knows he's ruthless," Bridget argued. "They want to know if he has a heart. Allie's illness and my story provide the heart. We flood the media with photos of Allie's foundation work and testimonials about my honesty at the Zenith Club." Elijah watched her, his expression a mixture of awe and desperate respect. "Do it, Bridget. You handle the media. General counsel, you handle the financial defense. Michael, organize the digital counterattack against Colt's shell companies." For the next 8 hours, Bridget was a force of nature. She drafted a powerful, candid statement that acknowledged the wallet was a test, a dramatic, but necessary, test of character, to hire the most honest person in New York for the Renewal Project Foundation. She leveraged her own story, publicly affirming that Elijah saved her sister's life out of genuine humanitarian concern. As the story shifted, Jeff Colt, who had anticipated denial and defensiveness, was caught off guard by the aggressive, sentimental counter-narrative. At 2:00 a.m., the crisis had stabilized. The market rallied slightly, and the financial pressure eased. Elijah was standing by the window, utterly exhausted, the mask of the ruthless mogul starting to slip. Bridget approached him, holding 2 cups of lukewarm tea. "We won the day, Elijah." "We won the day," he agreed, taking the cup. Because you fought for me when I deserved only betrayal. I fought for Allie's future and for my job, she corrected, maintaining the distance between them. And for the truth. Jeff Colt tried to destroy you with a lie. I refused to help him. Elijah placed his cup down and turned to her. What happens now, Bridget? Now the crisis is over, and my emotional term returns. I need time to think, and I need to be completely honest with Allie. She knows nothing about the test, Elijah stated. She needs to know I was entirely honest with her. And I need to know if I can build a future with a man who, out of pain and trauma, chose manipulation as his primary tool. She looked at the photograph of Aubrey on his desk. I believe you when you say you love me, Elijah, but I don't know if the man who built a wall of lies can ever truly open his heart enough for me to trust him again. I will let you go, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But Allie's care remains and your job remains. I won't trap you, Bridget. I may have started with a test, but I will end with a choice. Your choice. She nodded, took a step back, and left the citadel. She had won the war, but the battle for her heart was still raging. Chapter 9. Bridget took 3 days off, returning to her old apartment to stay with Allie. Allie, thriving and stable, couldn't stop talking about her successful midterms and the wonderful care. The stark contrast between Allie's peaceful life and the emotional chaos swirling around Bridget only amplified the agonizing choice. She was honest with Allie, telling her everything, her past job, the sudden offer, and the incredible secrecy surrounding Elijah's life. She omitted the personal details of their relationship and the specific deception of the planted wallet, only saying the job was an exclusive retainer built on high trust. Allie, surprisingly mature, listened intently. He gave up a lot for you, Bridget. He's a good man, he's just broken, right? And scared. Allie's simple assessment echoed Elijah's own confessions. He was scared of vulnerability, scared of loss, and scared of not being enough. During her time away, Bridget realized she missed him. She missed his challenging intelligence, his quiet protection, and the way his presence made her feel safe, despite the inherent danger of his world. The ultimate question was the reason for the deception greater than the resulting lie? The truth was, Elijah's motive wasn't malice or control. It was wounded, traumatized love, the fear of loss. He had created a twisted scenario to protect what he loved, and in doing so, he had found something new to protect, her. On the 4th day, Bridget texted Michael. Tell Elijah I'll meet him at the Zenith Club, table 14, midnight. The restaurant was closed for a private event when she arrived. The dining room was empty, except for a single table in the corner, the same table where he had first seen her. Elijah stood as she approached, dressed in a casual but expensive dark cashmere sweater. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Bridget sat down. I've been thinking about what I asked you, about Aubrey, about the lie, and about the man who hired me. I am ready for your decision, Bridget, he stated, offering neither plea nor defense. I am still angry about the surveillance and the wallet, she began, meeting his gaze steadily. It was a betrayal of my fundamental trust, but I also understand why you did it. You wanted to protect yourself from another loss, and you wanted to bring goodness back into your life. She took a deep breath. Aubrey's loss made you use manipulation as a tool, but my honesty forced you to drop that tool. You admitted the lie, and you let me walk away when you had every reason to keep me trapped. That vulnerability is the truth I need to trust. Elijah reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. I love you, Elijah, she said simply, but I need one final answer. Can we be completely honest from now on? No more secrets, no more tests, and no more emotional walls built on fear. The raw emotion in his eyes was overwhelming. "I don't know how to live without the walls, Bridget, but I know I can't live without you. I will tear them down, brick by painful brick. You have my word. I will never lie to you again. I will tell you the painful truth always." She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then I choose you, Elijah, the man who is broken and the man who is rebuilding, all of you." Relief washed over his face, followed by a fierce, undeniable joy. He rose, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a quiet, desperate fervor that spoke of a new beginning. Chapter 10. Their relationship began anew, built on the brutal, hard-won foundation of truth. Elijah made good on his promise, making a conscious, visible effort to dismantle the emotional walls he had built around his heart. He was meticulously honest about his corporate life, explaining every detail of the high-stakes battles, the legal risks, and the sheer ruthlessness required to defend his empire from rivals like Jeff Colt. Bridget, in turn, offered him the emotional clarity he craved, acting as his conscience and his grounding force. The first major symbol of this new commitment came a month later, when Elijah presented Bridget with an unexpected proposal. "I want you to take over the renewal project," he said one evening in the penthouse. "Not as a director reporting to me, but as a full partner. Your salary and benefits remain, but the foundation becomes your primary focus. You run it, you choose the causes, and you set the vision. I will fund it entirely, but it is yours." It was an act of profound trust, acknowledging that her true passion was helping others. Bridget wept, accepting the role that was perfect for her integrity and kindness. Elijah also faced the final remnants of his grief. He took Bridget to the small, private memorial garden where Aubrey's ashes were scattered. "I haven't been here in 2 years," he admitted, his voice tight. Bridget simply held his hand. "She would be proud of you, Elijah, not because you're powerful, but because you are starting to let yourself be happy again." He looked at her, his eyes full of love. "You're right. She helped me build the kindness in my life. You helped me save it." The external threat, Jeff Colt, eventually crumbled. Facing an insurmountable counterattack orchestrated by Elijah and Bridget, Jeff's corporate leverage dissolved, and his reputation was permanently damaged. He was a defeated rival, no longer a threat. 6 months after their difficult reunion, Allie was stable, thriving in her new, secure life and planning for college. She no longer needed round-the-clock care, a testament to the success of the treatments Elijah had provided. That evening, Elijah did not use an elaborate setup or a grand public spectacle. He simply came home to their shared penthouse, where Bridget was curled up reading. He knelt by the sofa, looking up at her, the deep love in his eyes overwhelming. "I was a man who planned everything," he said, his voice raw. "The wallet, the test, the job, the foundation. I wanted to orchestrate a life without pain. But the greatest thing I ever gained was the one thing I didn't plan for." He reached into his pocket and presented a simple platinum box. "No tests, no lies, and no hidden agendas. Bridget, I love you. Marry me, and help me spend the rest of my life figuring out how to be a better man." Tears streamed down her face. "Yes, Elijah, I will marry you." She accepted the ring, a single, perfectly cut diamond that reflected the clarity of their new, honest love. Epilogue. 2 years later, the scent of lavender and fresh-cut grass filled the air. Bridget, now Bridget Marcus, stood in a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of white roses. She was married to Elijah Marcus in a small, intimate ceremony at a secluded estate designed by Elijah himself. Allie, healthy and radiant, was her maid of honor, planning her first year of college on a full scholarship funded entirely by the Renewal Project. Michael, ever professional, drove the small bridal party away in the black sedan. his expression softening into a genuine smile as he offered his congratulations. Elijah, standing beside his bride, was still the powerful, controlled mogul who ruled the citadel, but the internal frost had thawed entirely. His smile was ready, his gaze warm, and the darkness that had once haunted his eyes was gone, replaced by the enduring light of contentment. "You look beautiful," he murmured, pulling her close after the ceremony. "You look like happiness." "I am," Bridget whispered, resting her head against his chest. They spent a moment alone, walking through the rose garden. "I know I started our life with deception," Elijah said quietly, his hand clasping hers. "But the only thing I've regretted is the lie. I'm thankful every day for the test." "I am too," Bridget admitted. "It was a dangerous, complicated way to start, but it brought me here, and it saved Allie." "It saved me," he corrected, his voice thick with emotion. He led her to a quiet marble bench in the center of the garden. On the bench rested a small, framed photo of Aubrey. "I don't need to hide this anymore," Elijah said, placing his hand gently on the frame. "Aubrey gave me the ability to love. You gave me the courage to love again." Bridget understood. She was no longer a ghost or a substitute. She was the continuation. Elijah looked at her, his love clear and unconditional. "I may be a ruthless businessman, but you are the reason I am also a good man. You are the honesty in my power." As the sun began to set over the sprawling estate, casting a golden hue over the roses, Elijah kissed her. It was a kiss of deep commitment, a choice made in full awareness of the past, and with absolute confidence in their future. Bridget, the former barmaid who had once feared the complexity of his world, knew she was exactly where she belonged, wrapped in the arms of the powerful man who had built a fortress around his heart, and then, for her, finally tore it down. A message of hope and remembrance. For every Aubrey, for every soul who has faced the relentless, unforgiving battle against cancer, we acknowledge the unimaginable courage it takes to fight. We see the bravery in the quiet moments, the resilience in enduring treatment, and the fierce grace in choosing hope, even when hope feels impossible. To the fighters and the survivors, your strength is not a given. It is earned every single day. Your spirit is the light that teaches the rest of the world what integrity truly means. You remind us that love, honesty, and compassion are the greatest weapons against any darkness. And to the loved ones, may the memory of the light you lost, like Aubrey's, not be a source of unending pain, but a perpetual reminder to seek and cherish the goodness, the Bridget, that the world still holds. You are never alone in your grief, and your capacity to love again is the greatest tribute to the love that came before. Never let fear silence the heart that learned to beat through sorrow. If you enjoyed this, the best way you can help me is to subscribe and leave a comment. Seriously, I need to know you enjoyed the story.